communicate in due course with the citizens in terms of the next political action.
Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. And welcome to Rumi Uncensored. And I just want you guys to really take a listen to what's going on here on Twitter. There is a meeting there regarding the constitutional crisis in Zimbabwe, recalls and by-elections, as well as the dialogue. So please do take a listen, and we can speak more on our comment section. Please, if you're new here, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Until next time, please take a listen to most of the answers that are being asked by Gift or Ostalos. Go ahead.
And people to exercise our responsibility as was given by the people. So those are the two dominant schools of thought within the broader democratic movement, and we have to consider those and make a review in the fact that the expiry of the 14 days happened yesterday, and we must make a review, and we must be very clear in terms of decision that we must take at that particular time when we know that we've exhausted all important avenues that we think must be able to give us a redress. So we cannot put the cart before the horse in terms of having a political determination on our engagement in council and in parliament when we've not finally and satisfactorily engaged in terms of other avenues that we think and remedies that we think must be taken. I hope I'm clear on that one.
That's all right. Patricia, my co-host, do you have any questions that you feel you would like to also ask?
Yes, thank you so much, the co-host, and thank you very much, Champion Ostalos, there for all the answers that you've given to the very difficult questions that you've been asked. Now, my question is around the upcoming by-elections. I know a lot of people have been asking on social media, and they are really keen to understand whether the party is going to participate in those by-elections.
Look, the question in our respective view can't be about whether we're going to participate in the by-election or not. The big question is whether there are going to be by-elections or not. That's where the question should be, because the law in this country is very clear. For there to be a by-election, is either there is death of a member of parliament, or resignation of a member of parliament, or a recall made by the sponsoring political party. And the law is very clear. The constitution, read together with the electoral law, is very clear that the sending and the sponsoring political party has to communicate that this certain individual has ceased to be a member of a political organization, and therefore we declare that there is a vacancy and ZEC must act on that. So what you see, as I've articulated in the first, in terms of what necessitated the so-called illegal recalls, was because the speaker acted on error, and therefore the proclamation by Mr. Mnangagwa is an unconstitutional act, because it is born out of an action that is illegal. It is born out of an action that does not follow due process, because the law actually mandates the Speaker of Parliament to ensure that he is abreast and satisfies himself in making sure that all the key parties on the issue are engaged, and so that he makes a determination. So we made it our position very clear on that, and we believe, and that is our position, that it's not about whether we are going to participate or not, but it is whether or not there should be by-elections in our country. And why this is an important question for ordinary people? It's an important question because these by-elections are going to be made at the cost of the taxpayers. And this is what is happening in our country. The assault on the authentic opposition and the alternative is coming at the expense of taxpayers. And that's why we've raised this issue wherever we've had engagement with ordinary people, so that we're able to politically resolve the crisis that is facing us. So our position is very clear, and we've made it emphatically clear, particularly in our legal redress, to make sure that there can't be a by-election on the basis of a letter that was made fraudulently, and a letter that was made, and a proclamation that was made, particularly by Mr. Mnangagwa, obviously with his political intentions, which are known, which is obviously one, to destroy the authentic opposition, two, to divert the nation from the big questions, thirdly, and of course, to make sure that they achieve their two-thirds majority. We have been in this road before. You know that when we went just for the election, 12 of our members of parliament were actually removed from the process, and we were able to utilize different avenues to ensure that our people were brought back, and 12 of them, all of them them won those seats, to return. And after they returned, they won the seats in Bulawayo. So all these are part and parcel of the assault that happens as we prosecute and execute our democratic struggle. But we remain fortified because we understand that we have to keep pushing until we achieve our collective agenda and the objective of our project. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Champion Ostalos. And I can also imagine the anger of the electorate. So, the people that went off and voted, and, it's almost taking away their voice. But I have the last question that I'm going to ask before I hand over to my co-host. So what is the next program of action going forward? What are you planning?
Sorry, I missed that. Can you come again?
Yes. What is the next program of action going forward?
Thank you. We are going to communicate, particularly black and white, in terms of our political action that we are taking. But part of the issue that we have done is to make sure that our local authorities become functional and attend to the pressing issues in our country, while we are also pushing, particularly in respect of the redress that we are seeking. And of course, remember that we made it very clear that we also want to utilize dialogue as a point of entry to resolve some of the problems that we are facing, particularly in Parliament, because our members of Parliament have been given a mandate to make sure that we resolve and have a conversation. And that process has been initiated in Parliament, and the conversation between ourselves and the Speaker of Parliament to ensure that we are able to resolve the issue of the recall and address the issue of the correspondence that has to go to the Speaker of Parliament and the channels that are used by our organization to different organs of the state. And so that is our immediate focus. But the broad focus of organization is to resolve the governance issues in our country, because Parliament is just but a sideshow of the broad national question facing Zimbabwe. So our biggest question and the conversation that we've jettisoned in Saturday is about resolving the governance and legitimate crisis in our country. So it goes beyond the recalls, it goes beyond council and parliamentary issues. It's a governance issue at national level. That governance issue is necessitated by Zimbabwe having hosted vicious cycles of disputed elections since 1980. You know, fellow Zimbabweans, that since the birth of this country, we have never had an election that has not been challenged. And what we think as people say, and what we have proposed, is that we must be able to cure permanently the problem of disputed election in our country, because it is at the center of the governance crisis that Zimbabwe is facing. And that's why we have put forward our proposition around a broad-based dialogue, not among its political parties, not in between CCC and ZANU-PF, not on the basis of sharing trinkets and practices of dictatorship, but on the basis of agreeing as a nation to say, how do we end these vicious cycles of disputed election? In 1980, we had a problem with the election of 1980 and the election that came after, the election in 2000, 2005, 2008, 2013, 2018. All these elections have been challenged politically and have been challenged in courts, including the election that just ended. So we have to cure permanently as Zimbabwe, hosting and always having elections. Zimbabwe is being pushed into this vicious cycle of elections that leave society divided and united. So we are very clear in terms of how we problematize the Zimbabwean question. We think that we must resolve the governance question, but to resolve the governance question, we ought to resolve the question of how we conduct elections. That's why we've said any political dialogue that must happen, that includes political parties, that includes the civic society, that includes the church, that includes the labor movement, that includes ordinary people in their representative capacities, ought to discuss the key questions of how we conduct elections, with the intention to ensure that any and the next election in this country that must happen happens on the basis of agreed framework and standards. And those standards are not new standards. Those standards are there in the Electoral Act, and those standards are there in the Constitution of our country. So for us, that is the big question, and that is our big focus, so that we're able to permanently resolve the crisis of disputed election in our country. Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering all of those questions. Over to you, co-host.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I think what we're going to do now, is we're going to have, because we are 30 minutes in, so we're left with 30 minutes. I think we have to open it up to people. I would like to precisely say that please use your 45 seconds wisely. I don't think this is the time to tell stories. If we can just stick to 30 to 45 seconds, Comrade Ostalos, if you can get just a pen and paper, so you can at least, so 5 people will ask questions, then you answer. 5 people ask questions, then you answer. If you feel that your question has already been asked, please do not repeat it. So I think over to you, Patricia. You can now try to align people at least 5 at a time for 45 seconds each.
Thank you so much there. I think just looking at the 3 speakers that we have on, because others have dropped off, I'm just going to pick. Signor, do you want to ask your first question? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Zimbabwe. Leadership, Ostalos, thanks for reaching out to the people. Very quick question. I think leadership is about accepting constructive criticism. Don't you think you have forgotten that the power to govern resonates in the citizens in as far as decisions that are speaking to promises that are not yielding anything? I like what you say that since since 1980, it's been a vicious cycle. How do you expect to squeeze water from a stone to get what Zimbabweans want without coming back to the citizens and re-strategizing, particularly now, but following the same system, expecting a different result at the end of the day? Would you take that constructive criticism? Many thanks.
Thank you for that. I'll take the next question. Please, can you make sure that you keep to the 30 to 45 seconds? Thank you very much. I'll come to you now, D. Mogi, please ask your question.
Thank you very much, Austin. Actually, to the question, I want to say to Kate Ostalos, please be articulate when you are putting across what you want to say. Okay, what am I alluding to? You cannot go off and say that you're going to cure
Sorry, I can't speak to you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, but this is about asking questions. Can I just stop you there? Please, if you do have a question to ask, please do ask the question.
Yeah.
If you don't, if you do not have a question now,
Yes.
you can come back later.
Yes. My question is, can you be specific?
Okay, I think they're connecting. Please, can we be respectful to the space and to try and ask those questions because of our time. If you do have comments and if we have time at the end of the questions, we can come back and take on board the comments. I will now go to Seke. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, host and co-host. Greeting to you, Champion Gift. My question is around the court proceedings on the 2nd of November. Assuming that the court decides that it's an internal matter and it gives the power to interim SG with the imposter to organize a congress, which gives him the power again maybe to do further recalls. What's your response on that? Thank you.
That's a good question right
Thank you
there.
very much for that, Seke. I'm going to now come to Mabuku. If you could ask your question. And then the last question will come from Michael. So that'll be 5 questions in total. Thank you.
Thank you, co-host. Siziba, good evening. Maboko here. My question, if I can point maybe to the elephant in the room, which is Chabangu. We know him as somebody who is engaged in opposition politics. And you've mentioned about the letters that you guys wrote to to the speaker in Parliament, informing them who was to contact them, etc. I want to understand from a CCC perspective what you think would have caused Chabangu to be confused about his role in the party if he's not actually allocated as the Secretary General or whatever the case is. Why do you think he got confused about his position in the party? That's my question.
Thank you so much there. And then finally to Michael.
Honorable, my question to you is, I've heard your mission. You say you wanted to win the election, and the main effort is to win the presidential election. And I understand that. But you did fail. When are you going to have a true conversation with the children of Zimbabwe and say you're going to regroup and maybe try next time?
Why do we have to try next time when we know that we won the election?
Over to you, Champion Ostalos. Thank you.
Sorry, before Champion Ostalos, can we drop off everyone who's asked questions? Can we drop off everyone who's asked questions so we can have space for others? Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very important question. Look, criticism is important to some of us. We are a Democratic Party. We might not be comfortable as a leadership collective about criticism, but what we'll never do is to bastardize and criminalize criticism. We cannot do that because we're an alternative. We might not be comfortable about certain propositions, but what we'll never do, and our ideological disposition doesn't allow us, is to criminalize dissent and criminalize criticism. And it's important because out of different opinions and views, and in fact, the reason why we hosted this space as a movement is to also harvest the thoughts and the thinking and opinions of the people in this particular micro-blogging site. Because remember that we're having engagement, we, particularly for myself in Chabalala, we're having our engagement, Citizens Forum, over the weekend to harvest the thoughts of the citizens. So this process is happening across the country. Just yesterday with these processes in Seke and other areas where citizens are being engaged around the way forward, because we're a mass movement. So a briefcase political organization can make decisions in a boardroom and implement them, but a mass movement cannot. You ought to exercise due diligence in terms of particular strategic directions that a movement is taking, particularly at a moment as this one. So we are very clear, my brother would ask about having conversation with citizens. We are harvesting your thoughts in these particular spaces. We are doing the same offline as we engage with citizens in our communities. So it's important, and we are always open to receive different opinions and views from the people. Of course, during engagements, you know people that would want to have propositions, and when their propositions are not taken aboard, they then begin to register certain displeasure. But you ought to understand that a mass movement makes decisions on the basis of different considerations, and that's how CCC functions. And we consult with the citizens, and we make certain considerations and execute them. So it's very important to have that understanding, and we are very clear for avoidance of doubt that CCC difference from those that we are opposing. We don't, as a movement and officially, and I want to say it because we've had these conversations on Twitter where people might have their own personal contradictions or issues with people who might identify with the organization, and translate those people's personal opinions and decisions to those of the institution or the organization. CCC does not criminalize dissent. CCC does not undermine people on the basis of them holding different opinions and views. Defeat us at the level of superior logic. Let's engage. When you make your submissions, we make ours, and we look at the superior idea that must carry the day, and listen to the people at the end of the day, so that we make decisions on the basis of the collective view of ordinary people. And there was a question, from my sister about Chabangu. Look, Chabangu is an impositor. I don't think in this space it will be genuine to have conversation on the basis of saying that he was confused on him being a Secretary General. We don't have a position of a Secretary General. And I'll answer this to Zimbabweans so that they understand why those who proposed that the new vehicle, there were certain things that were part and parcel of the yesteryear movement and the democratic family that we didn't want in the new political organization. What are those things? Number one, it is the creeping sense of entitlement and the culture of impunity from the political elites. Are you aware, fellow Zimbabweans, that we had a conversations internally in the yesteryear movement about certain decisions that were being made by certain political elites when we were in the youth organ of the then democratic movement? Certain people were accused for certain issues and they couldn't answer, and they didn't want to answer on the basis that they were saying, we founded this party, we started in 99, therefore we cannot ask questions. And the danger with that particular creeping sense of entitlement and impunity is that you become like ZANU-PF, you become an asymmetrical reproduction of the very same sobriquet that we are fighting. We can't be the same monster that we are attempting and driven to replace. So that was the first issue that we said must be resolved. That the new movement must not be on the basis, because there were so many people, new talents that were coming to the democratic family and wanting to contribute, and some get bastardized and shoved out on the basis of that. You don't have a history in the trenches, you don't belong to the tradition of the democratic struggle. A struggle cannot be that. One can't be a hero in two struggles. I've seen that there are so many debates about people that will say, because we've done this, we cannot be replaceable and so forth. Look, that's an exhausted and tired narrative, because every struggle has its own heroes, and society at all material times ought to produce the heroes of that particular struggle. I'll give you an example. We are going to execute this democratic struggle, but we can't be in the forefront of the democratic struggle forever. We ought to understand from our ideological disposition and personal persuasions that we are going to lead and live, that at a particular time there's going to be another generation that ought to come and execute this struggle with precision and clarity to the advancement of their generational interests and obligations. So that is where we stand. And one of the issues also that was important, moving from the yesteryear movement and those that became the part of the formative stages of the alternative, was the question, in and around different roles. You know that the position of the Secretary General in the history of the politics in this country had problems. Go and start the history of political parties in Zimbabwe, both ZANU and the MTCS, which was founded in 99. And the collective recommendations was that the position such as that of the Secretary General must not exist in the new movement. And to then come and say an individual claims that in CCC, which made a strategic and decisive decision that this particular position must not exist. The changes of the CCC were not just around issues of culture that I've talking about, were not just on the issues of ideological trust and direction. You know that with policy shifts, particularly in the new movement that we made on questions around land and, of course, how we engage in the geopolitics of the world. And more importantly, around the structure and the nomenclature of the new movement. That's why you don't see us going back. In the yesteryear movement, we are addressed in different ways. We had different organs of the institution, because the yesteryear movement was born out of the communist structure, which necessitated, of course, changes with lessons from Germany and other social democratic parties. So we made those changes, particularly around the nomenclature and the structure of the new movement, how it must be done, and the roles and responsibilities of different leaders in that particular movement. So to then come and say someone was confused to say that I'm a Secretary General, because that designation does not exist in CCC, and it closes the case. Then there was a question around what happens in courts. If we go on the second leading to the judgment of the case, and there's a decision that is made, particularly to try and undermine our interests, we have made our points very clear. The consultation that we have made so far concluded that, and of course we are going to communicate officially in terms of the position that we have taken then, necessitated by the circumstances of the time. But citizens have made a position that if there is an intention to try and undermine the people, particularly the vote that was cast by people, if there is an intention and an objective and a conclusion to undermine that vote, the citizens are very clear that we must invoke Section 59 of the Zimbabwean Constitution and use the streets as a point of entry and register our displeasure around the decision that we have made. And citizens are very clear on that because that right is encapsulated and captured in the constitution of this country, and obviously to be a point of no return. But the party and the movement is going to communicate on that decision. But so far, the conversations and consultations that we've made with ordinary people are very clear that if this happens, citizens must invoke Section 59. I think that those were the questions that I received, and I hope that, of course, there was the last question around regrouping and accepting. Look, every organization and citizens, I'm not so sure, with great respect, my brother, in terms of the view, whether that is the collective view of ordinary people. If it is the collective view of the people, the party is going to succumb to that view that the party has to make a certain determination on the basis that citizens are saying you must accept this and move in this particular direction, because this is a mass movement, and if the citizens detect a particular thrust, this is the direction that we are going to take, and it is important that you understand, and I hope that your feeling and your view is also associated for by the collective citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, the Champion Ostalos, for answering those questions. We've got another set of speakers, so there's about 4 of them, and I'm going to come to you, Norma, because I know that you waited a long time and you also dropped off. So if you could go ahead, please, and ask your question, and then we'll move on to Nkobizit. So sorry if I mispronounce your name. Nkobizit, and then Smarties, and then Mukoma Jason. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I just want to bring back the question because I feel it was disingenuously answered. So to give context, let's not go back to the MDCA as a far memory, but let's look at just a very near memory of a party spokesperson self-announcing and self-installing, and that being the new way of doing with Promise Mkwananzi on the day of elections, which rendered Fadzai Here not the party spokesperson. But I like the fact that you mentioned that you're a constitutional party and the constitution organizational structure is absolutely there. Could you actually just enlighten us? What positions is this constitution limiting the organization of the CCC to? If Chabangu should not be confused about his position, how many positions are there as per constitution?
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Next.
you,
Thank you, Nomadis.
I think it was Nkobizit was going to speak. And Nkobizit, I'm so sorry.
So yeah. Thank you. I do forgive you for mispronouncing the name. It doesn't matter. My question to Comrade Ostalos is, Comrade Ostalos, does the Democratic Alternative have a set benchmark on when we are going to complete this struggle? It has taken a long time. In your conversations as a party, is there a timeline when you think that this struggle must surely come to an end? We can't be in a perpetual state of struggle. Then number 2, the last question is, what is the party doing to ring fence itself against the intrusion of persons like Shabangu? Because we don't know who will rise tomorrow and claim to be a treasurer of the party and claim to be or even claim to be president of the party. So what is going to be done to ring fence the party against the intrusion, not only of ZANU-PF through surrogates, but of any person who can wake up tomorrow and claim that they are representing the Triple C? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Okay, I think I'm next. Honorable Gibbs Ostalos, thank you so much for coming through to the space and the moderators. My question is on the participation of the diaspora community. So I was listening to your presentation, Honorable Member of Parliament. You mentioned that there are engagements that are taking place right now in Seke and other constituencies. So my question is on the progressive citizens, like who are in diaspora. What is it that we can do in order to support you, as a movement? We appreciate the work that you are doing back home, and alive to the fact that you are trying to fight not just ZANU-PF, but you're trying to fight each and every institution that has been captured, and you have gone even to the extent of putting your lives at risk. So my issue is on us as the diaspora. What is it that we can do in order to help you? I know before the elections we had some initiatives that we ran with around defending the vote and some fundraising initiatives. What is it that I'm about to finish? Okay, thank you. So my question is on just our participation. I know we defend the territory on Twitter Spaces, but I feel we can do more. Is there anything that you feel as the diasporans we can do in order to help the movement, to help the president, to help the leaders, to help the party, especially now that we are fighting ZANU-PF through its imposters? Thank you.
Okay, now Nkoma Jason. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much, co-host Ken Radio and the Citizens host. I just want to say before I follow on the question, I want to appreciate Honorable Ostalos for, on behalf of the party, for actually coming forward to interact with the diaspora, especially on Twitter. My question really is just a follow-up to what Smarters was asking. I know we've got solid structures in the country. I know consultations are made every day, now and again. But I think the only problem that remains is that I think is what Smarters were talking about, the participation of the diaspora. The diaspora is key in terms of media, in terms of information dissemination, in terms of fundraising for the party. And I think it is high time that you try to ensure that at least there is some form of, because I know at home, I know the structures start from the cluster leaders, coordinators, and all that. I think we need something of that sort, maybe again in the diaspora, so that we can have a coordinated approach in terms of fundraising, a coordinated approach in terms of even when people want to do demonstrations and all that. So that is where my question is placed. But I want to thank you very much, because there's been a problem, because people try to ask questions. Nobody has got the answers. And now that you have come forward to answer people's questions, that is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. I think someone's mic is open. For the 5 is G Much. If you could go ahead, please, and we'll hand over to Champion Ostalos to respond. Thank you.
Hi, Patricia. Thanks for adding me. My question is, I just wanted to ask, can you hear me, you guys?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Ostalos, Comrade Ostalos. I appreciate what the guys are doing on the ground, and I appreciate and I can see the strategic ambiguity. It works, but it's only that we were cheated. But I wanted to ask if they have got it's called a crisis conflict resolution department, where conflicts are resolved and things are resolved amicably before they explode. I understand the terrain that the guys are working in, and I understand, a lot of people are doing politics of the stomach. But do they have that sort of a department? That's my question. Thank you very much.
I think those questions, I don't know, are they 5?
Yes, there were five questions, and then there's a couple of new speakers, 3 speakers that have come on. So there were 5, yes.
Okay, so I think maybe Ostalos can go ahead.
Thank you very much. I missed the Norma's question, so I don't know whether you can let me know of the question, or I can just proceed and answer the other questions.
Okay, I've just requested for her to come back up, but you can go ahead with the other questions while she's accepting the mic. She'll ask when you're done.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, maybe Norma can start.
I said, I appreciate you saying a lot of institutional memory in the distance of MDCA, but I wanted us to bring back the memory of a recent past where on the day of elections, a party spokesperson announced themselves and immediately became a party spokesperson. On what basis was that done if Chabangu cannot do the same thing? But you also clarified that you're a constitutional party. And within a constitution of any form and kind, we know that organizational structure is defined very clearly. Please advise us to what limitations do these positions count for? Do they count for president and spokespersons only, or they make up of a broader organizational structure?
Thank you very much. I hope that maybe after I finish this, we can maybe have the last questions. But thank you very much for the brilliant question. So I'll start with the question from Brother Mlambo on timelines. You know, Brother Mlambo, as a student of history and of course as a student of modern scientific thought, that struggle, as was articulated by Marx, to struggle is our reality. Human beings, particularly revolutionaries from one generation to another, are permanently involved in a process to struggle, because the intention and objective of a struggle is to change the realities of ordinary people. So it is almost impossible to put particular time frames, but programs of action have time frames. So on clarity in terms of our intention to occupy power is defined by the cycle of elections. So it is very clear in terms of the programs that associate themselves with that broad struggle. But even beyond an election, the struggle for humanity continues. That's why people, even in the progressive world, are struggling for different issues. Because from one generation to another, we always discover our own obligation as generation and something to ensure that we fight for. Because to fight is our reality, as human beings and progressives in society. So we might change from one struggle to another. The liberation project, is, if I want to put it very clearly, in the three phases of our country, there was the liberation generation. Its struggle was captured under the liberation consensus. Its central objective was to get one man, one vote, universal suffrage, and of course land as the key demands that defined that particular struggle. From then, obviously, came the democratic family and the democratic consensus. That period, which took from 99 up to, for 2 decades, whose intention was to democratize society. So that struggle for that generation was to make sure that there is democracy in the post-liberation. So there was the democratic consensus driving that struggle. Post that, come Triple C, come and enter Advocate Nelson James and the Triple C Leadership Collective with the transformation struggle. Its objective and its underlining agenda is to make sure that we bring transformation. That which was attained politically must be translated into the democratic structures and democratic institutions of society. But now we have to make sure that it leads into transforming the lives of ordinary people. There, me and you can sit down and say, look, what was started by Josiah Tongogara, by Nikita Mangena, by Joshua Nkomo, continued by the democratization process as was led by Dr. Morgan Richard Swangrai and the democratic consensus and the democratic family, leading us into the key struggle that was entered, which is the consensus of transforming and bringing the economic gains to ordinary people who have gained democracy, who have gained, of course, in course, democracy in course, and of course, political independence. So that is our objective, and that is what defines. And the timelines of the programs differ that are part and parcel of that trust. The question on about unity, on inclusion, look, We have made certain strides, obviously legally. Most of them are legal routes to make sure that we protect our movement, particularly around our symbols. Isn't it ironic that an individual can come with the face of someone in a symbol and say, I belong to that organization? Is it not ironic? But more importantly and more succinctly, Brother Mlambo, to answer you on how do we intend to resolve and protect the party from further intrusion. The first one was obviously around the legal part, that the symbols of the party, intellectual properties of the party have been registered and initiatives taken to make sure that we protect our organization, we protect the identity of our organization, and of course the properties of organization, because you know that the current history of political parties, ZAPU had their properties confiscated by ZANU-PF, a lot of them across different parts of the country. The MDC also faced the same fate, because part of the authoritarian consolidation program is about attacking the soul and the infrastructure of the target opponent. So we have faced this assault in the democratic family, and Zimbabweans were for post-ZANU-PF. And the only way to protect that is to make sure that you are able to patent the key intellectual properties that belong to the movement. But secondly, Brother Mlambo, also we have said politically now, from the legal side, it's obviously what I've talked about, but politically, we have to make sure that we are able to unite our forces, because unity is key and acts as an important buffer against further intrusion and political decay of the alternative. So that's why you have seen us closing rank and ensuring that we're able to unite our forces, we're able to unite different champions, we're able to unite Zimbabweans towards a particular cause, towards a collective agenda to win Zimbabwe for change. And President Chamisa has been very clear in terms of making sure that the envelope of dialogue that we're using is a platform to use dialogue as a platform to unite Zimbabwe, so that we are not able to walk into state house on the basis of destroying, particularly in making sure that we lose lives on account of politics. So it's part of the process is to make sure that we are able to protect our movement. But I'll then clean also my third intervention with the question that came from Jason and of course Norma. Norma speaks very passionately about, I would answer in black and white about the spokesperson. We have two things that we have not put in the public domain that have been used by the CCC. Number one, we have our governing statutes as a movement. Number two, we have also made sure that we also have our governing bodies. And one of the bodies, to put it very clear, is the Citizen National Assembly, which is the highest decision-making body in our organization, which makes decisions of key national significance. And we have duties that are mandated to specific individuals, the office of the president, and different bureaus in the party, and decisions during the elections were being made. In communication department, we made specific decisions because of the mandate given and bestowed upon us. And the president exercises his duties again to make sure that we make deployments and redeployment, because once I'm assigned to the communications department, I can be reassigned, because the communications department deploys are on the basis of appointment, and the appointing powers and appointing authorities vested in the office of the president. But there are different organs of the organization which exercise different political responsibilities. You know that we changed certain staff members in our organization, and those decisions were made by the administration Peru and the organs of our movement. So decisions get made. Maybe you were conscious or became aware of the information department changes because of the strategic decisions that were made by the department. But from one time to another, we make decisions about how to deploy our members in parliament. We've just appointed the leader of the house. We've appointed committees. I, for one, been deployed to the International Parliamentary Union. We have people that have been deployed to the chief whip options and so forth. So we make deployments and we make assignments and reassignments. Because once you are assigned to a duty, you can be reassigned to other responsibilities, and that is how a political organization operates. But also, I would twin that with the question, and a very important question that has been asked by Jason, my brother, there, and Norma and Mlambo. Part of the key things that the party has been focusing away from the charade and the market show that we've been seeing about the recall is the processes of building a credible alternative. And building a credible alternative answers directly the question by Norma to say, now it is clear to the Triple C Leadership Collective, it is clear to Zimbabweans that once we are able to resolve all these issues, part of the key things of building a credible alternative is making sure that we put, because the constitution, as you raised, Norma, is a public document, and because of we were in the formative stages and certain issues were being considered, and there is a stage that is coming that will make sure that all these documents become public, because you are part and parcel of the citizens who must know in terms of how do we reach a certain decision and at what stage do we make this decision. And it's important because that lacuna is one of the issues that obviously has been utilized by the regime. But I want to tell you, because there are those with a mind of, there are those with limited understanding of how authoritarians operate. Authoritarians will always find a loophole to assault. The intention of the regime was to destroy the authentic opposition. Even if we had all these issues sorted, there was going to be an avenue. And if you check your history, how the opposition has been splitted before, there's always going to be investment and channels and avenues to try and destroy the authentic opposition. But we have reached a stage in terms of our program of action to make sure, so you are going to be seeing in time to make sure that our websites are public, accessible to the people. I was just seeing people that is within my department viewing the website of the party and all the necessary governing statutes that have been uploaded there and reviews, and we've been consulting with certain people who are experts to make certain changes in our website. So all this ought to be there so that if you want to participate, we make it known how do people join the authentic opposition, what are the colors of the party, what are the values. And we're going to see also some of us being redeployed to key offices, because part of the important programs of action we are taking is to build the soul of the party, what we call ideological class consciousness, to conscientize Zimbabweans, because what you see right now is a society without a soul. So we ought to invest in political education so that Zimbabweans understand where we are coming from and where we are going. So we are going to be investing there on the school of ideology and training, because it is important to have people whose objective is to educate the people, because we were told that to the extent that the masses are not conscious, the leadership is to blame, or the vanguard. So we have got the duty to make sure that we politically educate our youngsters, we politically educate young people who are going to take over the reins of authority in our alternative in terms of the future and governance of our country. So we ought to invest that. And you're also going to see Triple C pronouncing itself in terms of key issues. You're going to see alternative cabinets coming in. You're going to see, the issue of the structure being resolved, because processes are conscious and are aware in terms of how to interact with each other. And we are able to resolve our issues, because this time and the time has come so that we're able to resolve some of the process, but they're going to come at the right time, communicated by different bureaus of our organization. So that is where we are. And it's important, because building a credible alternative means this is what ZANU represents, what you represent. So alternative policies are going to be very key in that particular process. You are going to see people given the responsibility to make sure that they speak on issues that affect our people, on electricity, on energy, issues on agriculture, and so forth. So deployment is going to be very key. And to answer Jason, to be very clear, at a certain stage that is going to be communicated, you are going to see the rolling out of how we are going to be constituting the party, because it's a mass movement and we are building it from below, because the yesteryear movement was blocked at the top, where a lot of people constitute the top, but we are building a mass movement, and the important investment must be building the base. So once we build the base, what we call as our structures or leadership that are there at polling station level, because we agree that we must build our movement twinned with the electoral boundaries and processes. So we're building from there in terms of the leadership question of our party. So it's very important. And lastly, there was a question from Brother Smart. That's a smart question around the role of citizens. The first and the most important thing to fellow citizens, and I think that I have to put it very clear that, like in any struggle, our struggle has bruises, our struggle has pain, our struggle has a lot of contradictions, and we face this. Just yesterday, we went to visit Honorable Chidakwa, who was assaulted by ZANU-PF thugs, and I want to say something very important. I was talking to Honorable Chitava, the former MP of Mavuke, and said, how did these people drag you from your car to their car? Because you are a fighter. And he said, I fought for almost 15 minutes and I called out to citizens and no one came to rescue me. This is a change champion, a leadership, a part of the leadership collective of CCC, who is in the forefront of executing this struggle, executing the demand that the people have been said. That has confront ZANU-PF. They became aware, and in their own intelligence, the issue that was being accused was about a demonstration that was suspected to be happening in Mavuku, and him being in the forefront of that struggle. And because people here in Twitter spaces had confirmed and said that we must occupy the streets and in different parts of our society. But when Chidawa called ordinary people and said, I'm being abducted, help me, no one came. He fought, these people could not put him in their car easily. He fought, but no one came. In fact, the person who was selling airtime, because they went to him when he was buying a charger to one of the vendors in town, the first person to disappear from the scene was the vendor. The second thing was citizens who disappeared from the scene. And mind you, this is happening along Samora Machel in Harare. So you ought to understand, to answer my brother Smart, that solidarity is important because we are prepared to surrender ourselves before we surrender this project. But we are conscious of the material realities of Zimbabweans on the ground. That's why we cannot be pushed to say, look, you can decide to say, let us take this particular task, but we understand the realities, the concrete realities on the ground, and we ought to make sure that we organize ourselves if we are to make certain and necessary steps. So we don't have to say no, because emotionally we are affected by the assault. There is no struggle without bruises. The Liberation Project did not lasted longer than it was anticipated by revolutionaries, but there were always going to be setbacks. Your base is being bombed, people get killed, people get abducted. That is the nature of struggle. That's why we are permanently engaged in this struggle, as long as our people are still living a life worse than the dogs of the rich. So we're executing this struggle, but we are conscious of the realities on the ground, and we ought to have a mix of these particular interventions that are being proposed and the realities on the ground, so that we're able to protect our people and we're able to know that the revolution is ready to be executed in a second gear than the gear that we've been pushing. So we are very clear solidarity is important and support from ordinary people, because when you're abducted, I was abducted and tortured in ZANU-PF headquarters, abducted by people. In fact, when I came from group, I met physically with the people that had abducted me, and I tried to go down, this is the person, and no one would come to rescue, because you ought to understand the society and the site within the Zimbabwean body politic. So these are part of the challenges, and they come usually at personal cost of different champions. But we remain fortified, because this struggle is about selflessness, it's about sacrifice. But you ought to be conscious in reality in terms of the challenges confronting society and the challenges confronting those who are at the forefront of leading this struggle without play. And we are not scared. And ZANU-PF is conscious and understanding that would have chosen an easy and comfortable route to say, look, we've gone to an election, Mnangagwa have won in a fraud election, we got to benefit trinkets and trappings. But we are true to our principles that the election was flawed and that issue has to be resolved. It's not a personal question, because if it was a personal question, President Chamisa would have taken the options of being a leader of the house, being given state security, and would have chosen strawberry and dessert. But we chose the collective decision by the people, even if it comes at a cost to our personalities and it comes at a cost to our responsibilities. We've made it very clear, and let me conclude this question by putting it publicly, that all our deployees are very clear, and we are very clear as a party, even if it means, because Parliament and Council is not our station of choice. For CCC, the station of choice is State House, because when we assume executive authority, we're able to change the lives of ordinary people. Being in Parliament does not, in its greater sense, translate the concrete realities of ordinary people. So we ought to make sure that people understand, yes, there might be setback about me being in Parliament, but our objective has never been, because I defined our objective as I started this conversation, our objective as a party is to attain political power, that is government in total, and govern different. And when we have Parliament, yes, we have made certain steps. When we're in Council, yes, we have made certain steps, but that's not the station of choice. The station of choice is make sure that we occupy government And on that basis, we're able to implement our policies. We're able to change the lives of ordinary people. So being recalled, being removed from parliament by the regime, not by any of these impositors and people that you see roaming the streets and claiming to have power, when we all know in terms of the people behind the recalls, it is ZANU-PF. And if ZANU-PF decides to close on that space, if ZANU-PF decides to close and vote and put a vote of no confidence on elections and democratic processes in this country, let it be so. But do we stop to advance the struggle? No. Do we stop because we don't have members of parliament? No. Because that is not our objective. Our objective is to make sure that we occupy power, and when we occupy power, we are able to use it to change the lives of ordinary people. So I hope it sufficiently answers all the questions. Maybe I can take the last round so that we're able to conclude this space. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, the Champion Ostalos. So we have just a couple of people, and I can't remember who came first. I'm just going to go with Nyasha, if you can ask your question, and then the last person to ask will be Vusi. Thank you. Nyasha, can you go ahead, please?
Oh, thank you very much. Good evening to everyone. I just wanted to ask our champion, Comrade Ostalos, what measures are you taking in terms of dealing with this Chabangu guy? Because he's busy destroying our party, and we don't want to let history repeat itself, of which it happened in MDC. What measures are we taking? Are we supposed to go after him, or are we taking the legal route? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nyasha. And now Vusi, please.
Okay, good evening, champions. So I think I have two questions. Good evening, Comrade Ostalos. So my question is I think you mentioned something about the constitution, like our CCC constitution. So I'd like to know, because it's telling do we have our party constitution, or is still in the making? And then the other question is, I've seen if we check Ubaba Professor Weshman has been writing it's like reviews. When you check his Twitter handle, it's like he's writing something about. I mean, if you guys are following, you can see that he's been using riddles whenever he's presenting his tweets. And then I want to ask if is there any problem amongst our leaders like Professor Washman, Nelson Chamisa, Tendai BT? Are they pulling in the same direction, or there is some problems? Because with all this that is happening, no one is coming out from Washman to say that what is happening is wrong, what Chabangu is doing is wrong, but everyone is just quiet. We find that we champions we are left with no one to ask what's going on. We are just asking ourselves, answering ourselves, So I would like Ostalos to just help us with that, so that we understand what's going on. Is the party still intact? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think we had one last person who just came on board, JT. Please ask your question, JT. Thank you.
Thanks, my sister. Thanks, and thanks, Ostalos. And I want to take my hat off to you guys. To operate in a very undemocratic and abnormal country. The things that are happening there, they're unbelievable. And for anyone, to accept the abnormality that's happening there, I think it would be totally madness. And thanks for raising the issue of Onchidakwa, and we wish him well, because if the regime can do that, it's just totally madness for anyone to start, accusing certain things that we don't understand. But my quick question is, when are we going to accept ZANU-PF urinating on us? Are we going to wait until we accept this Uri Des Rey. I like what's happening in Mozambique, and should we emulate that? And thanks, Smarters, for what you've asked as a question as well. What are we going to do? We are willing to donate more to the struggle until we achieve the desired result. So the diaspora is ready. I've got people that contact me every day. Champion, what are we going to do? We need to push this struggle till the end. It's only started. So we're waiting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that my first response is to the question around the Chabang. I think that we exhausted that, unless there are other specific questions, but I think that they've been cleared, and the party is working around the clock to make sure that we are able to resolve some of these issues that I talked about around the symbols, around the party's name, around the abuse of our party logos, our addresses, and so forth. So that is being taken care of at the political and, of course, at the legal level. The other question, of course, very important question around the constitution, I think I spoke about it, you might admit it, it's part and parcel of our building of a credible alternative and solidifying the movement as it was founded. So President Chamisa, different champions, the movement, and the leadership collective are actually pressed with the issues and seized with the issues to ensure that we build a credible alternative. One of the things that we want to do is to build a modern political organization. That was one of our post-election agendas, to build a modern and a credible political organization. So I know that our technical people, like I was saying, that just this afternoon we're reviewing our website, and our website involves all these documents, the governing status of our organization, and we're going to launch it so that citizens are able to access it and they're able to contribute into the movement. And we're also going, of course, part of the broad post-election agendas in the agenda to build a credible movement is to make sure that we focus on recruitment and mobilization of citizens, where we're able to translate some of our supporters into core members and leaders of the movement. So we are going to be engaging certain citizens, some publicly known, some not, to become part and parcel of this citizens movement so that we can all contribute. Because at the end of the day, fellow Zimbabweans, this is the movement of the people, and we have to do everything to the best of our abilities to make sure that it is a turn for everyone, and people with competence and capabilities are given the responsibility to lead our movement in different zones and different capacities. And you know that the movement is broad. You are also going to see us coming into the diaspora to make sure that we solidify and build a credible chapters across and bureaus across the region, particularly in South Africa, in Botswana, and of course in Europe and in different parts of the world. So we are going to be exercising and initiating these processes because it's part of our post-election program of action. There was a question on Prof. Ngube. I think that I haven't seen anything amiss, and I hope that I'm not missing any point, because I mean Twitter handles of personal individuals do not acquit to institutional propositions and positions. But look, I think that your broad question is in around whether who is who and who's not there, and there's a lot of propaganda that is put out there on behalf of individuals, and I know that on certain individuals, myself, Prof. Ngube, President Nelson Chamisa, a number of people have had fake accounts created on them, and particularly the fake screenshots where conversations get generated and spread on WhatsApp. And those conversations are fake, and let me put citizens on notice that they don't reflect the views of our different champions. But of course, the state will always try to manufacture propaganda and manufacture certain views which don't reflect our personal views. The broad question around contradiction, there is no movement world over that does not have contradictions, and it is about how we resolve contradictions and move on, because contradictions emerge, some ideological, some policy-wise, some personal, and so forth. But we ought to understand at all material times we direct ourselves and attack the central strategic objective of the National Democratic Project, because, mind you, in executing this struggle, We might be here today on Twitter Spaces and we might not be there tomorrow. Because when you become a 10 champion, targeting ZANU and authentically opposing ZANU, you ought to know that you have put death sentence on your head. So the reason why we live the life we live today, because we understand we are constantly under surveillance, we understand that we might be here today and we might not be there tomorrow. But we know that if they kill us, they're not going to kill the idea of democracy. They killed Lenmo Jongwe, they killed President Tsvangirai, they killed all these revolutionaries, particularly in the democratic family. But the struggle, we have to continue. Some will come and take over the struggle and advance it because that is the nature of the democratic struggle and the processes that we're engaged in. And we are not scared. That's why we always say we fear nothing. We fear for all because we understand that in this struggle there are contradictions, there are threats to our life, and we know that if we're not there tomorrow, we have left a mark in the annals of history that when there was dictatorship in our country, we confronted it with clarity, without fear or favor. So problems will always emerge, but we are a leadership collective and there are always ways. The question by JT, of course, you are reminding me, my brother, of the conversation that happened in the African National Congress just before the armed struggle in South Africa, that the younger people there met in an underground program and asked themselves key questions. Are we going to continue fighting armed people through letters? And that is what necessitated the change of the method of struggle for the African National Congress from Satyagraha, as was inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, into the key resolutions that they made, including armed struggle, underground operation, and international solidarity. So a movement at all material times will sit down and consider, particularly on those key issues, and the highest organs of the organization ought to meet and make decisions in how we want to engage in the struggle. For now, we have defined our objective, that our objective is to attain political power. Revolutionary theory is very clear, and of course, our method of struggle is through the power of the people and the vision of transformation. And thank my brother for the question around solidarity. My brother JT, it appealed to my conscience because we are living under very difficult circumstances. Those who are engaged with different change champions understand. Just now, our Peru on international relations and Honorable Timber, Honorable Gladys Khatwa and Honorable Timber were detained in airport. They wanted to arrest them, confiscated their passport because of the work that they've just been doing, because they assist with some of the work in the region and of course in the continent because of their political responsibilities in the international relations Peru. So I'm saying this to dramatize the extent and the direct threat to the lives of people who are engaged in this struggle on a day-to-day. And that's why it's important to understand and to appreciate on behalf of the Triple C Leadership Collective and on behalf of different change champions, the solidarity that you guys have given us, the solidarity that we have been given. Because moral support is important. You might not even donate, you might not even participate physically in the struggle, but just to give moral support to those who are engaged day to day to the struggle is important, because this is what fertilizes and gives soul to the struggle and fertilizes our struggle to go forward. So it's important to give each other solidarity as Zimbabweans. We might have our differences, but broadly as a society, we must be able to unite towards the particular goal and objective to liberate our country. And those minute and smaller differences might not be the broad issue that might divide us. Yes, it's important for people to have different views and opinions about how we must execute the struggle. That's why, as a leadership, we've made the decision not to criminalize those people, because we understand that, yes, I might have my differences with Alexio or Ngobizita or my brother Kuda or Lighthouse or, Audrey, as I see people here. I might have differences on how they propose. But we are all together united, Dr. PT, on the collective agenda to liberate ourselves. That is the broad goal. Whether Dr. PT wakes up tomorrow saying, I no longer want to wear yellow, I want to wear pink because I support cancer and I want to be permanently associated with that. Or my brother Gerard says, I don't agree with the decision to disengage or to engage. Or my brother Freelance says, I'm not agreeing with Ostalos supporting Highlanders. I want him to support Dynamos. It happens. Those are minor differences that must not stop us to unite on the collective agenda to liberate ourselves. Look at what's happening to people who are in the industry right now. I saw a post that came from my brother Tinashe Mtaris, about running for 7 days without electricity, right? So we might, be engaged in this struggle differently, but this is what is happening to business on day to day. You might have money, but when you go to the bank, you can't take your money in the ATM. The bureaucratic red tape will still affect you. You might be in business, you might not worry about what happens in politics, but politics will come to you, because the problem in this country, it is the politics stupid. So we might be a journalist and say, I don't want to be engaged on these issues, but it will come to you, because when you get meager salaries, when you're being sexually harassed by your bosses that give us sexual favors so that we promote you in the national broadcaster, the national broadcaster is there on the basis of taxpayers' money. And how do we allow, and we're going to be raising this issue in our portfolio committee on media, that how does a person in ZBC say someone must give me a sexual favor to move from Bulawayo to come to Harare? And more importantly, why does someone has to look for greener pastures to move from Bulawayo to Harare when, if our country is devolved? Why can't we make sure that Montrose Studios in Bulawayo are built sufficiently for people to enjoy work there? But it shows you that centralization has gotten to the level and extent that people have to lose their dignity, people have to sacrifice their bodies to get favors whom they qualify on the basis of merit. So for me, this is our plea and this is our position from Triple C. Yes, people might differ, and it is important to differ, because out of those differences, we are able to build our collective agenda, we are able to build our movement. Because whether I don't like certain individuals, this is their part. This is the citizens' movement. It is the home for the oppressed. It must be the vehicle for the oppressed. It must be vehicle for the downtrodden to find an alternative voice. So we ought to make sure that we are accommodated to those views, and we ought to make sure that we are uniting citizens, we are uniting Zimbabweans. It doesn't matter, it might be difficult, there is no struggle without pain, there is no struggle without bruises. That's why Samora Machel said it to fellow change champions and revolutionaries who are fighting today, speaking at the time that when bullets begin to flower, the struggle in Zimbabwe is our struggle. So we give each other solidarity with the suffering masses of Mozambique, with the suffering citizens of Western Sahara. We give them our emphatic solidarity, because we understand that the liberation of one country in Africa is not sufficient without the liberation of the other African countries. So we ought to make sure that the transformation discourse is collective, so that we change the lives of Zimbabweans in particular and Africans in general. So that is what defines our struggle. Fellow Zimbabweans, fellow citizens, we hosted this space to make sure that we give you update in terms of what is happening in your movement, and also to gather your thoughts. Let me thank everyone who's been here, listening to our agenda, listening to our proposition, but more importantly, the contributions from citizens, because we are collecting them to make sure that we submit them to the relevant organs and bureaus of our party for considerations as we build and wage our collective fight against dictatorship and against fascism. Citizens are assured that under extreme difficult conditions and the current assault that the democratic alternative is facing, you are assured that we are going to remain undeterred, we are going to remain focused on the big prize on the game, that is democracy. That is the prize to make sure that they change in our country, and to make sure that President Chamisa ushers in the national democratic project to the next step. Thank you very much, the host, citizens, and Change Radio. Thank you for hosting us, fellow citizens, and I will be able to take leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for watching.
Indeed,
Thank you.
Honorable Siziba, for taking the time to be amongst us and for clarifying and responding to all those questions, some very difficult questions that were put across to you. Thank you very, very much. I know that there was CC Nab, Dr. Ranga, who wanted to say hello. He's here. Host, can you please prepare a song to play us out? And CC Nab, I don't know if I'm breaking protocol, but you can say hello to our Honorable Siziba, and then we'll close.